Yeah, that's it. Cool, perfect. So we've started the recording. I'm happy. I mean, John, just to make a small introduction. I mean, when we've met the events of the Kettering Foundations, this is an institute of research in US focused on democracy, and we had several discussions. One-to-one, also during the discussions during the workshops and so on. And at a certain moment, I was telling you that we have a network of amazing professionals that are under the umbrella of the community foundations, and they are in different regions of Romania. And there is also an umbrella of the Association of Community Relations, ARC it's called, and they are using for a few years elements from ABCD methodology. And even if some of the people don't use it as ABCD methodology, there are things that you've defined there and you are promoting. But then I had a discussion with Alexandra, and Alexandra was telling me that it's like, hey, let's have an event. I mean, let's invite John. And then you told me, I would love to. I cannot do it, to travel long distances anymore. And then it was the idea of having an online event whereby you have a chance to meet with well, online, of course, with the professionals from various communities in Romania, various cities that are hands-on there, doing grassroots, and um, they have a lot of involvement within communities for helping organization within communities to build, build their expertise, to get more funds and so on and so forth. So that's when we came up with the idea of having this online meeting. We wanted last year. I'm happy that it's finally happening, and that we could all find a time that is suiting us. And with no more talks, John, you have the floor.
Hi. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm speaking to you from Chicago, actually, a small city just outside of Chicago where Northwestern University is located, and that's where, in the latter part of my life, I was a faculty member there. So, I was asked, how did this whole idea of ABCD get started? And it got started because when I was a young man, I was a neighborhood organizer in Chicago. And that meant that I was sent to neighborhood to try to create an organization of citizens that could increase their power to solve problems and influence institutions. And these organizations, I don't know if you're interested in the history of neighborhood organizing in the US. There's a book called Reveille for Radicals, written by a man named Saul Alinsky. And he was the godfather of neighborhood organizing. And so I was working with his group in terms of organizing in neighborhoods. And then I had some other things I did in the civil liberties area and civil rights, as well as the neighborhood organizing. So I did that for about 20 years. And then the university I graduated from, Northwestern University, got a large grant to start an urban research center. And it was called the Center for Urban Affairs. It's and it had 24 scholars, mainly from social sciences, who were half-time research, half-time teaching in the university across a wide spectrum of disciplines. when they began this center, they realized that they had researchers, but they didn't have anybody who was really connected to the city, the neighborhoods, where the action was, where the research might be useful. And so the professor who got this large grant to start this center had been a professor of mine when I was an undergraduate. And he came to me and said, would you come and be the associate director? And we'll start a new kind of research center in this that does support for local groups. I agreed to do that. I had a great regard for this professor. He was the most famous faculty member in the United States, I'd say, in the field of race relations, it was called back then. So at any rate, I went to the university.
What's his name, John?
Pardon?
What's the name of
the university? Northwestern University. It's
of the professor.
Professor's name is Raymond Mack, M-A-C-K. And he's got a lot of literature that he wrote. He's passed on now, but he was my sort of mentor when I was in college, and we worked very well together. So I have to confess that I am a fake professor. If you look at Northwestern University's website, you'll see I'm a professor emeritus. But I have a bachelor's degree in small groups, right? And so they made me a professor, believe it or not, with my bachelor's degree. I'm the only one in the whole university. And initially, what I was to do was to take all the organizations I work with and I knew in the city, and try to find out how research could help them. And then to connect them with our research scholars. Now, what I found out was the reason ABCD got started. And it was this. All of these professors thought they were interested in or involved in urban research, but research was about what's wrong, right? Research is in a neighborhood, how many people have cancer, or how many bad houses are there in the neighborhood, or how many people use drugs, right? So that all 24 of these scholars wanted to help in neighborhoods, and they were prepared to do research, but all of them looked at a neighborhood in a city the same way, which was, this is a troubled place with people who have lots of problems, and we are going to identify their needs and then do research to demonstrate the nature of their needs. We'll do needs surveys, and then that information can be used to fix people, right? To fix the neighborhood. And the fixers would be the local government, or health agencies, or social service agencies, so that the scholars were doing research for institutions that were designed to fix local situations and people. Now, that was a total surprise to me, because here I had come from those neighborhoods, and not only were they places where people didn't necessarily need to be fixed, but instead they were coming together and creating groups, doing some planning, taking action to improve the neighborhood. And nobody at the university, no university in the United States, knew what was there. They only knew what was broken, right? And so they had no idea about the citizen work that was going on in the neighborhoods, the problem solving that was going on, the creative inventions that were taking place. And so when I realized that they saw the world through a deficit perspective, they saw the world through the empty half of a glass. They didn't see the full half. I decided that I was going to take on a major research project to identify the full half of the glass, the capacities, the skills, the abilities, the knowledge, the activity that people were doing rather than what was wrong with them. And there was no real name for that kind of research. The name for the traditional research was needs-oriented research, right? And so we spent 4 years going around to neighborhoods in Chicago and older inner city neighborhoods all over the U.S. and Canada. And we gathered stories about what it is that people did there in the neighborhoods to make the place better. And let me tell you, to the degree that people who are listening are researchers, that the question we would ask is, and we're not asking leaders. We're asking people who live on a block, right? So we're knocking on a door and we introduce ourselves. And the question we would ask is, what have people who live on this block or in this neighborhood done together that has made things better? What have people done in this neighborhood together that has made things better? And we collected about 3,000 answers, stories that they told us over 4 years. 20 cities, maybe 300 neighborhoods. So all of a sudden, we knew more about what was there than all the universities and governments in the United States, right? Because nobody paid any attention to what was there. And so we looked at these stories, and we didn't think we could publish a book with 3,000 stories, that nobody would read all that. So how could we summarize what people do at the local level and how they do it when they are the producers rather than the consumers? Okay. And so what we asked of each story was, what is it that people used in this story to make things better? What were the ingredients in the story? What were the building blocks that they used when they made things better? And after looking at all 3 stories, we concluded that there were 5 basic building blocks that people used in the stories when they came together to make the place better. 5 basic building blocks, right? And you could say these 5 things. There was no name for these 5 things. And you could say they were the ingredients of a successful community cake. Be one way of thinking about them. The ingredients of a successful community cake. Now, I suppose there are a fair number of people who are joining us today who are in universities. And at least at my university, when we decided that we were going to put a university publication out that had the title, The Ingredients of a Successful Community Cake, the director of the center, this is a new director from the founder. The founder became the president of the university. But she said, we don't put out publications in universities that have titles like The Ingredients of a successful community cake. We didn't know any better. We were neighborhood organizers in the university, right? So we said to her, well, what is wrong with that title? And she said, everybody will understand what you mean if you use that title. And we said, well, that's the point. We want them to understand what we mean. And she said, John, you haven't been in a university very long, but let me explain to you that what we do is we take what everybody already knows, these words that they don't know, write in those words, and then tell them, right, that if they want to learn about their neighborhood, come here, we'll teach you our language, and you can learn about yourself. So we went back and decided, how could we figure out a title that nobody would understand, right? And we said, well, what are these 5 things? And one of our team, a brilliant guy named Stan Halleck, said, you know, what we have identified from a financial point of view is assets. Right. There are 5 assets that almost around the world everybody uses when they make things better with local resources. Those are assets. So we took the word asset then for the name of these 5 resources, and then called what we were doing asset-based community development research as against needs-based community development research. And I must say, we then published a book that is a guidebook to these 5 resources, right? How to find them in your neighborhood, what you can do with them, that kind of information, right? And that book is called Building Communities from the Inside Out. And if you'll pardon me for a second, let me get a copy here.
Yes, sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Tudor, Liliana, and everybody that joined later.
Glad to meet you.
Can you see this? Can you see this?
Yes, we are seeing.
Okay. This is the book, and it has 5 basic sections, one on each of these assets, and stories about the use of the assets and the names of the local groups that created the story, the case study. So the subhead of the book is A Path Toward Finding and Mobilizing a Community's Assets. So we published 500 copies of that book. It's a university publication. And when people found out about it, all of a sudden they began, we got orders and orders. At our center, we have boxes of books. We couldn't get up the stairs, right? And it's sold about 125,000 copies by now, and is sort of the basic document for understanding from our perspective what asset-based community development is about, and in particular, what are the assets. So if you want to get it, you can, I think you can order it if you look at our website, which we'll show you later. But also, I don't know, there are in the United States a lot of sites. Yeah, there we are, our website. Good. And also in the United States, there are a lot of sites where booksellers are. And most booksellers in the US have used copies. And they cost a lot less than a new copy. So if you're interested, that's a way of following up. Name of the book again is Building Communities from the Inside Out. Now, let me see briefly if I can review what the 5 assets are. Right? And there are more than what I'm telling you, but what we tried to do is to say, whatever they were doing in this story, these 3,000 stories, is there something that was universal, that almost everybody used? Now, when I say used, I don't mean they used all 5 of the assets. I mean that they were, that the building block set they had 5 blocks, and they might use block 2 and block 3, or 2 block 4s and a block 1, right? So it's a mix and match kind of use of those assets. So the first asset is the flour in the cake. It's the one ingredient that is in every single story. And remember, I am telling you, I should say, for people in universities, never use the word story. See, when we had these 3,000 stories, we had them in a big bag. And when we got to the front of the gate of the university, the bag said stories on it, and we covered that over, and we wrote case studies, right? So what we had was 3,000 case studies in a university, or 3,000 stories in a neighborhood. And those are the 2 languages that sometimes keep us from understanding each other. Right? So the first asset is the gifts, skills, and capacities of the residents who live in the neighborhood. And we have done a lot of research on what is the nature of the individual capacities and resources that appear in these stories, right? And since the stories always involve people, always their assets are the ground floor asset. Now, we've been doing this a long time now, 30 years or so. And so a way of approaching people in a neighborhood or a block that we have found gains a lot of information about what is the nature of the asset that this person represents or is to ask 4 questions. Now you could ask 100 questions, but these are the 4 that we think are probably especially productive, and you don't want to take up an awful lot of people's time. But they are: first, ask first question is, what are your gifts? And gifts, by gifts, we mean something you were born with. My sister has a gift, and that is a beautiful voice, right? She was born with it, right? I was born without it, right? So a gift is something that comes with you. The second question is, what are your skills? What are things you have learned and know that are useful to you and to an enterprise and to a neighborhood? The third question is, what are your passions? What do you care enough about that you will act on it or have acted on it? Right. So the first two questions are telling you about a resource, but the third question is really telling you what's the priority in their life that they are most likely to act on. And the last question is, what do you know well enough that you could share it with other people on the block or in the neighborhood? And that question, I think we had experimented in some neighborhoods by saying, what do you know well enough to teach? And you get fewer answers asking that than you do by saying, what do you know well enough that you could share with your neighbors? Because if you use the word teach, a lot of people think that who teaches is a teacher, and they're not a teacher, right? And therefore, you've sort of gotten them to sit back and frighten them a little. But those are the four questions that we think are the most significant that we found from the stories. Now, there are other kinds of questions that when neighborhood people begin to use these, that they begin to see are also important. So you can get a large list. There's a neighborhood where they have developed another question that I like. The question is, in your life, have you gone through troubles, hardships, painful things that you would be willing to share with your other neighbors so that they would learn that they're not alone, and number two, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and number three, that maybe 6 people on the block have the same problem and we get together. We can be of help to each other, right? So it's those 4 questions are starters with a lot of other possibilities that come when you know a particular neighborhood. The second asset is, and this is a word I think used maybe more in the United States than it may in Europe. The word is association. And by that, the manifestation that is an association is groups, organizations, clubs, any relatively small group of people, right, who are able to engage each other face to face, and they're not paid, and the members do the work. So an association might be 6 people on a block who are concerned that the stream, the small river that goes behind the houses is polluted. and they come together and get their neighbors and the kids in the neighborhood together, right, to clean up the river. So that's a self-forming association, right? Groups of people get together to do something to make things better, right? There are, so self-forming, but there are also what we would call long-standing associations. And here, I don't know that wherever you are, what we would name as associations you would have, but for instance, very often locally, we would have a group of people who are interested in dogs. And they may have formed a dog walking group, right? Another group are concerned about music, and they may have formed a band there on the block to play at community events, right? And another group of people on the block are people who are veterans of a war. And they've been together in a veterans organization. So there are long-standing associations and newly forming associations. And together they make up what we would call the infrastructure of a democratic community. And in 1833, a French count came to the United States, and he was interested in understanding. He took a trip to Canada and the North and the South United States, frontier times. And he went back and he wrote the most famous sociological book, although there were no sociologists then, that's ever been written about the United States, and I would say Canada. And it's called Democracy in America. Mm-hmm. And in it, he says what is really different in the United States and Canada from what is in Europe, at least in France and England, which he knew well, he says, is that they have associations that are the building blocks of their society. And by and large, we don't have much in the way of associations here in Europe. So his book is about democracy in America, but the central democracy he's talking about is not voting. And Tocqueville said, voting is the power to give your power away if you're in the majority. You can't even give your power away if you're in the minority. So he says it's vital as a means of controlling government, but it isn't really very powerful. What is powerful is people in association with each other, because they're not giving power away, they're making power. And so from that perspective, associations could be understood as being essentially a political form. But when you look at them, a sociologist might say, well, that's a political scientist view. From a sociological point of view, they're a small group, and we're interested in them from a different perspective. So at any rate, that's the history that leads us to use the word association. And I don't know whether there's a parallel in the countries the people are from who are listening for that word. However, when the Soviet Union broke up, and a lot of new countries were formed. A foundation in the United States brought together people from all the new countries, and they asked me to talk to these people. These people were all focused on health. To explain to them, to talk with them about associations. And so I think there were people there from 17 countries. And I began to explain what I've just explained to you. And I could see that nobody understood what I was talking about, these associations. I've talked to a lot of groups, but I felt like a total failure. The Soviet Union, they were from the new countries or historical countries, right? And finally, after I failed and failed to get it across, a man from Poland said, "Mr. McKnight, you don't use the right word for association. For us, an association is a conspiracy." Now, if you say conspiracy, we know what you're talking about, because all these groups you're talking about are legal, are threatening. And so what Tocqueville saw was that the heart of a democracy is its associations. And what happened in Poland is an association, a union formed, and things began to change a lot, right? So we think of associations politically and socially. They are connective tissue of people at the local level, but it also the basic organization by which citizens get mobilized and act powerfully. So that's the second asset. The third asset is institutions. And I don't know whether you would see it this way, but let me see if I can. Because, you know, an institution is like a triangle. Let's take an institution like a government. It has one person at the top, and beneath them, 5 cabinet ministers, and then 32 commissioners, and it goes on and down. It makes a triangle, right? And it differs as a structure from associations, which are like a triangle. I mean, like a circle, what did I say? Circle. So a lot of ABCD talk is about the difference between circles that are flat and circular and usually small, as against institutions that are triangles, right? Now, you know the organization chart with one box at the top and maybe 100 boxes at the bottom. You're all familiar with that. Yep. And that's the basic form of institutions, whether they be for-profit institutions or not-for-profit institutions or government institutions. They are a hierarchy, right? Not a circle of related people. And so when we were thinking this through, because institutions appeared in the story, we went to our graduate school of management. That's where they teach people how to work a triangle, right? How to make one of these things work. And we said to 4 or 5 professors, why is it we understand why people form associations and what they do with them, but it's a strange thing all over the world, regardless of the form of government, they create institutions, and they're always triangles. Why is that? They're triangles in countries of every political form. But there they are. Why? And they said to us, thinking, boy, are these guys dumb. They said, well, look at the organization chart. Can't you see? It's the way you organize people when you want to have a few people control a lot of other people, right? So there's a big difference between association, which is voluntary. People come there, you can't control them. They say, there's a better television show on tonight than your meeting, right? And associations are essentially self-determining and self-controlling. Institutions are there to control. So one person at the top will control everybody else. Now, some people, when I say that, they think that that's not very nice. They don't like that. But I think it's important to point out that every one of us have good reasons to like having triangles where a few control many. Tomorrow, I am going to fly to Dayton, Ohio. I do not want to get on an airplane where the pilot says, well, folks, we're all here. Where shall we go? Right? That's what we would say in an association. Well, folks, we're all here. What shall we do? I don't want a pilot who says, listen, there are a lot of controls up here. Anybody know how to make them work? What I want is one person in absolute control and a couple people on down in the next box who are helping them out, and a bunch of other people who are the little boxes in the bottom, right? Do you understand? So there's nothing wrong with a control structure, right? It has its place, right? You can't make a good automobile without having one of these. So institutions are forms that do some things well because of their structure, and they do other things poorly because of their structure. The same thing is true of associations. There are some things associations do well, and it's not flying airplanes, right? It's other things like getting people to act together to clean up the river, right? So the form predicts the function. And I've written a paper which you can get at our website, which is called Neighborhood Necessities. Neighborhood Necessities. And incidentally, everything on our website, except for the book, is free. Everything we know about ABCD is on that website, and it's free. So if you want to follow up, look it over. But what was I saying? I got off the track. Just before this, I was telling you.
And the form predicts the function.
Oh, yeah. This paper called Neighborhood Necessities says there are 7 functions that make for a community that associations are better at doing than institutions are. We all know what institutions do, right? But we don't think about the infrastructure of community being the associations and what it is that they do. And so this paper tries to distinguish 7 functions where institutions may do some of it, but without an associated community, it really won't get done well. So I commend that paper to those of you who are thinking about the difference between institutions and associations. Also, on our website, click on publications and they'll all come up. There's another one which has as its name the title is The Geometry Lesson. Tells you about the difference in geometric terms between a circle and a triangle, right? An association and an institution. Now, we think, why am I dwelling on this so much? We're dwelling so much because mostly the failures that we saw in neighborhoods were because institutions were trying to do what they can't really do, and associations weren't doing what they can really do. So that the functional analysis of what form of human gathering is best able to provide different kinds of outcomes, I'm abstracting now, is very much at the center of our work. And the reason is because almost everybody we deal with who are in institutions see the world from an institutional perspective. And they don't see the associational sector as being as or more important in achieving well-being than the institution itself. There's no police force able to bring safety and security to the neighborhood compared to what the neighbors can do. There is no hospital or therapeutic program that can deal with addiction in the United States as well as an association called Alcoholics Anonymous, right? A group of people who come together. So we think that at the local level, often the best thing we can do in helping have more productive neighborhoods is to work with associations, identifying them. We know a whole lot about identifying associations and working with them on recognizing what powers and capacities they have, and working with institutions on how to support associational life, not control it, not direct it, not serve it, not fix it, support it, right? So we have an institute, and our institute is mainly about how can associations act more powerfully and how can institutions support them in that work.
John, talking about institutions, I mean, since we have another around 40 minutes, I would invite you to have some closing remarks at this point, and then move a little bit towards more like discussion with the people in the group, because they might have questions that would anyway be related to what you're doing. So just a few words to end the ideas that you want to share, and then we can have a move to the reality over the ocean on this part of the the world, and tell you a little bit of what's happening here and how these things that we're talking about are are seen at local level through the community foundation, but also through other actors, and anyone can, of course.
I can do that quickly. See, I got out of the neighborhood and into the university, and university, all people do is talk. So I used to act, but now I'm just a talker, right? So anyway, I'll just say what the other two are, only a sentence or two. The fourth asset is the physical environment of the neighborhood. It's an asset. A vacant lot is an asset because you can make it into a community garden. Right? And the last asset is not a thing, but we have labeled it exchange. That among these four assets, what's going on all the time is sharing, trading, bartering, exchanging, buying, and selling.
Yep.
And that's the connective process. So the conclusion of the story is that there are three things that we have learned that are central to community change. And the first is you have to know what assets you have. And if you need help, you can use this book. Number two, you have to realize that every story, every one of the 3,000 stories is a story in which assets that weren't connected became connected. And so the connective process is central to community building from our point of view. Leadership is good, but that's not central. Connectorship is central. And the third thing is that you can know your assets and you can know they need to be connected, but usually that doesn't happen unless some individual or group takes the initiative of creating the connections, right? So at the heart of the action that makes assets valuable is connection. And at the local level, we think there are, on average, 3 to 4 people on every block who are good at connecting. You don't need to train them, you need to find them, right? And engage them in ways that make them feel what they know is good and introduce that function to people in the neighborhood. So that's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, we need 8 hours for this. It's like and how it developed and everything. The idea in the US and then through Cody around the world. But I will use this next few minutes kindly asking you to share a little bit about the work of the community foundations in relationship with this idea of focusing on assets rather than on needs. Moving from the triangle to the circle. So Sandra, Alexandra, Andrea, whoever wants to say a few words.
I will say just a few very short words. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. First, I would like to thank you for your presentation. I think that it's a gift to learn from to learn about ABCD directly from the source. So we really thank you. Secondly, I'd like to say that I connected very much to the cake story and metaphor as I'm just finishing my PhD. And this morning I had to explain to my 6 years old what ABCD means because he was curious about it. So I used the case study, not the case study, but the story. And I'm just going to give you a very short overview of the community foundation movement in Romania that started 12 years ago. Our organization has supported community foundations to grow in every city where we found good local leadership. There are 19 community foundations in Romania at this moment, so it's a movement that grew enormously in 12 years. And Mihai was saying that we use elements of ABCD, but I would say more that we use the lens of ABCD than elements from the methodology. It was just a way to remind people that they can look at the assets that they have in community instead of being kind of swamped in all the huge needs. And the way the movement has developed is that in the first year there was a lot of effort in setting up these organizations as fundraisers and grant makers. The effort went a lot there and in supporting local leadership. But now there is a very clear shift towards understanding the communities and working more and more with the community. And 2 years ago, we had a common effort with all the organizations that were at the time in the movement to work on their strategic planning, and Alexandra was one of the experts working with them. And this is when the real work with, or the deeper work with the community started. I wouldn't say the real work because the people were always in the community, but then they started to go deeper. And two more things that I like to pinpoint is that we have tried a model of understanding communities that is called vital signs, and it's used very much by the Canadian community foundations. But this is a very quantitative approach, which is not necessarily relevant for Romania, as there are not enough data on the market. So I think that the qualitative approach, stories / case study is more important. And that's it for the moment. I will just pass it to Alexandra, and then I would kind of try to see how what we are doing is kind of fitting into the things that you have told me. But
also, thank you. This is so exciting. And I think I've never nodded so much by listening to someone. So I work with community foundations and other associations that have a different meaning for us. Truly, associations are, fortunately or not, institutionalized in Romania. So they act, again, unfortunately or not, as a hierarchy. But increasingly, something that's giving hope to a lot of people working in this field of development is initiative groups made by neighbors, residents, that actually are exactly what you have described as being an organization. So voluntary groups of people deciding that it's time for them to change something for the better, generally at the scale of the neighborhood or even a street level. So it's quite sort of it resembles what the stories I've been listening.
Yeah, it's like getting together to save the trees in front of the block of flat, because the city hall wants to cut them and put their building.
Yes, and on top of what Mihai is saying, this is the reactive version. So communities that sort of try to defend themselves, that feel completely sort of aggressed, violated by institutions. That is the first this first level or the first stage. Now we have a lot of, several initiative groups in Bucharest at least that have a more proactive vision, and they say, look, it's not just about fighting off whenever we have a deep, hurtful thing. It's about thinking long term and seeing that we want to stick together because we're neighbors, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very interesting transition in less than 10 years. So it's effervescent if you come into it from outside. You say, oh, in 30 years of democracy, this is what you have, just this. Others would say, well, it takes a time to grow a culture of civic participation at the grassroots level. And this is what I'm most interested in. And working with community foundations especially is very interesting because they are agents of paradigm shift as well, locally. So although they speak of money and getting funds, they really speak about looking at resources and assets more broadly.
Mhm.
So I'm super excited about this. I have been following the ABCD Institute for at least a couple of years. So for me, this is like, I want an autograph.
So John, you have a stalker. That's how we call it clinically, stalkers.
And I'd be curious to hear about how this conversation resonated with the other wonderful people we have in this call, including at least one person from a community foundation, but don't think this is just about foundations.
So the floor is open for questions and more comments from everybody in here. One thing that might be useful to unmute if you want to do that, and maybe to show your face. So give us some video. So Mihai Lisetsky, we know that you are with a group of students, part of the class there at the Universitatea de West University. So if you want to join us, and anyone else, of course. Yes, Mihai, we are talking with you. No pressure. So who else wants to share from the? Okay, Tatiana, join the club.
Hello, thank you for this occasion. So it was quite unexpected because I found out about this meeting only a few hours ago from a friend in Romania. I'm currently doing a PhD in value creation and capture mechanisms in innovation ecosystems, and I'm looking at both the social value that is created and the economic value. And I'm going to start a project in France, in Grand East region, to work with the social innovation and how with the Godin Institute, which is an association in France that is focusing on social markers. And the point would be to try to adapt the instrument that they have already developed and worked to intervene in a region in France, and to see how they can be used to support the social innovation in a different region in France, starting from the point that you cannot like copy paste some specific solutions, that you need to adapt them. So I was not aware about your methodology. I find it interesting because I'm a strong believer of the needs of developing communities, and I've noticed that lately it's so important to do it not only at like in non-governmental and like communities in terms of the local level, but you need to do that even for the different organizations if you want to keep people together and to create the kind of connections and to use this force, the human force. So I find it interesting, and I'm really glad that I had this opportunity. So I will look with curiosity at the information that you have on your website and try to think, because I saw some connections with your work, and this reminds me of the work of Elinor Ostrom, who has been doing research on the use of commons and the way they can be the Nobel Prize winner, so who has been doing this research on how the commons can be used, and what's going on with the use of commons in the current area or current era, when some companies try to use them without maybe giving back what they should, you know. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks the Romanian team for organizing it. So I'm really glad to get back in touch with some of the people that are taking part.
Excellent. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you. And congrats for the work you are doing there. I mean, we want to find out more. Let's have a talk afterwards about it.
Yes, sure. We get in touch and we discuss. I will share it with, I will share gladly about it.
Please do. Look, John, look what you do. You put people together from there.
Yeah, because I'm with some of the persons in the conference, we've been working together when I was in Romania. So I moved in France like 1.5 years ago and started something different here. trying to export the know-how from Romania and to gather some and to have an impact here. So
just to put it a little bit in context, John, there are around 4 million people, 4 million Romanians that got out of Romania in various countries, most of them in Europe, but also in the States, etc., in the last 30 years. So imagine that we are 18, like 20 million people. So 4 million of them got out. So it's a huge number of people that left Romania. Just to have a little bit of context and to see that we have like 40%, something like this, of rural communities right now in Romania. And you have a lot of broken communities in there because the parents, the young adults are away to work in countries like UK, Spain, Italy, Germany, some of them in France. And you have in these rural communities or very like small towns, only the kids and the seniors in there. So it's I'm bringing this in discussion because this makes it extra hard to have interventions in such communities, and that's why the work of the community foundations of ARC and other people that are in here in the call, it's you know, to be applauded because it's tough.
Mihai, if you allow me just to add a very small remark, John, I was very empathetic with you when you were speaking about your audience from former Soviet Union, because I was born in a small village in Soviet Union, in fact. So afterwards I moved to Romania. So there were no associations except for the association of the Octombres and the Shoi Mi Patriei, similar Romanians know of the organized by the Communist Party, and that was it. So however, there were other mechanisms by which people helped each other work together at the local level. So
good.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to intervene?
Yes, this is Juana. Hello. I'm turning on my video even though I'm in the car because I work in one of these rural communities and I often have to be from one place to another, and I use time in the car as time for listening in or calling. Also sharing Alexandra's comment about nodding all the way through this talk. So thank you again, John. I wanted to share the fact that without I'm not a researcher. I'm a practitioner in a way. So I share a bit of the history with you becoming an emeritus professor without all the official steps. And I work for WWF in a landscape where we are trying to restore nature through bison rewilding. But the core work there is to create mechanisms for people to take ownership of these natural assets and protect them as their ancestors used to. Anyway, what I wanted to share was that without having done, a lot of deep reading about ABCD, we have actually intuitively started practicing this method and went through a long process of interviewing a lot of people and listening to them, and it was around their talents and their passions and the things that they care about. And one amazing thing that came out is actually that this process uncovered a lot of trauma, we were made aware of a lot of trauma to do with various relevant things to us. So for example, we work in trying to change behaviors of hunters, which seems a bit of a conflict between what WWF is about and people that you'd never work with. But anyway, these traumas were immensely useful in then understanding the power structures there, understanding very seemingly small thing that changed everything and changed the behavior of a group. So it was a very enriching experience, and I highly recommend it. That any project, any initiative, any appearance of one, community organizer in a new context starts with, I don't know, months and days of listening to people. And this is what I wanted to share. Thank you for everybody's contribution and work.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Juana. Do you have any questions to John or any? Because it's
I do have a very short question.
You do have a
question. I think that it's kind of voicing a general thing. One of the issues that we're having in local communities is that it's very difficult to make the institutions understand the roles that association, or however we want to call them, play. And I would like to know more. Of course, the cultural context is totally different, but I would like to know, how did you work with institutions in order to make them understand the role that the organizations, the local organization, can make in changing the community? Because I think that this is a vital question for Romania.
This is for John?
Yes.
John, you are kindly asked. Anna, thanks a lot.
I would say our institute is made up of about 50 people who are faculty members, although only 2 are in universities. We call our practitioners faculty, right? And they are distributed all over the United States. And they do mostly training and consulting and sometimes presentations. A majority of their interaction is with institutions that have asked us, can you come and work with us on reorientation toward a community-centered rather than an institution-centered approach locally. And we hear from police departments, we hear from public health departments, from all kinds of human service agencies, even some corporations, they're half of our constituency. And so the best I can say in short is that these people are able to work with institutions in ways that influences the paradigm within which they understand themselves. And if you look at our publications, you will see that a lot of them are really for institutions. One that I would commend especially is called Discovering Community Power. Yeah. And it is 2 sections. The first section is a tool for planning that absolutely will result in your listening to and mobilizing citizens as producers. If you look at it, you'll see if anybody follows that, they will have at the end an ABCD initiative, right? It's the most important publication, I think, that we have. The second part of it is, how do we as an institution do an asset inventory of ourselves? What would a lot of people associated with us do asset inventories of neighborhoods? But the second half of that publication is an asset inventory of institutions. But its focus is on identifying those assets in the institution that can be used to support local communities. So how could they look at themselves and say, what do we have that is useful in support of citizen production? So I would commend that publication. Then we have in this book, the basic guide, Building Communities from the Inside Out, a section. If you can only see it on a screen, it begins on page 355, and it is an example of 3 different foundations, community foundations, who have changed their orientation toward an asset orientation. And it is the guidelines of those 3 foundations that are based on an asset understanding of community rather than a needs problem understanding. So there you can see what the 3 groups understanding what we talked about at the beginning. How do they build that into their very value and guideline system?
Excellent. We have another question from Mihai. Mihai, you need to unmute your, well, it's advisable to unmute yourself if you want to ask us. If not, you can just put it in the text chat thing.
Mihai, you can also unmute him if you are the host.
I can unmute you, Mihai. Just a second. Because I'm that Mihai, it's this guy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, great. John, first of all, thank you for your presentation. It's really inspiring. I'm here with a bunch of students. You can see them somehow?
Hello?
We are at the University of Timișoara within a master program for people learning about how management can be used in sports. And the course I'm teaching here, it's about how professionals in sport can use sport activities in order to solve community problems.
Wow.
Luckily, your presentation is exactly in line with the seminar we had today. We've been discussing about social responsibility, about strategic development goals and community, basically. Now, the question for you is, if you know any example about how sports activities could be used in order to create, solutions for community problems, either from your experience, either from what you heard, or just your opinion as an expert in the field related to, and again, it's a great opportunity for us to have you here.
Well, I don't know. Sports may not be an area in which I have frankly been involved. We have been involved much more with municipal departments of parks and recreation. And there, a lot of people are involved in sports. And one of our faculty who has dealt with a lot of those departments is called Cormac Russell. And Cormac is in Ireland, believe it or not. He's come over to Canada to work with parks and recreation people and ask how can they be agents of citizenship and community building. So maybe after me an email, I can tell you how to get in touch with him. I'm not sure that that's right on point, but That's the best I could do at the moment. We have 50 people. Each of them are sort of different areas of work. And so one of the things I do is sort of refer people to other people who know what I don't know, who are on our faculty, which is a lot. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
We'll wait.
Thank you so much, Mihai. I mean, since it's here 5:26, so officially we have another 4 minutes. If you all agree, and if you have questions and comments, if you agree to stay another like 10, 15 minutes, it's okay with you. If not, we have another 4 minutes, as you wish. But initially, I want to ask you, John, what do you think? Is it okay if we make it a little bit longer?
Oh, sure. I don't have anything to do for an hour and a half that I have to do.
Okay, so actually what we are asking if we can stay another 1 hour. No, so thank you so much. So if let's plan to have another 15 minutes for those that can stay, those that have other commitments. Thank you for joining us. But again, if there are any other questions from the persons participating.
Yeah.
Because I have a question, but otherwise, Andrea, I can see you. Yes.
But you can go first, actually.
No, please do.
Okay. John, I love it. I'm a bit sad that I'm finding out about these ideas now, and it wasn't a bit earlier. But still, how do they say, it's better later than never. I work in a community foundation, and I've been part of initiative groups. It's like 5 years now, and I see something going on in groups that form around the cause, either civic or political, or something connected to people being upset about something. And what I see that is happening is the group becoming dysfunctional and not really managing to work together for a long time. I've seen power struggles going on, and I've seen this tendency for people to look for a leader. And I was thinking about the image, the visual image that you created around the idea of associations, a circle. And I also connected with something that Tatiana said, that she is coming from a Soviet small town. We all come, I mean, Romanians have this communist history in which we got organized by the central party, you know, like the party was forming associations for us, so we don't really have a culture of being together in a functional way. So, and the question is how can we do it, you know? Because if you take separately, the people from the group might be very smart, but when you put them together, things get blown away. Or sometimes I've seen the group having this tendency of becoming institutional. You know?
Andrea, yeah. Where are you now? Where are you talking from?
I'm in Galați. I'm at home in Galați.
Okay, thank you. So
yeah.
This is like the eastern part of Romania.
True, it's near the border with Moldova, with Basarabia.
The Republic of Moldavia.
Yeah, Moldavia. yeah, if you have any ideas, comments, or resources about that, how can we be like smarter together in this, you know, associations of some sort?
Okay. Let me say, and this is from the US and Canada, right? That many neighborhood groups got formed as associations of associations, right, locally, to put pressure on institutions, right? They get formed, and what they want to do is to put enough pressure on the government to pick up the garbage regularly, right? Or to make the school better. So they are the circle, and they see themselves surrounded by triangles, and they have grievances with the triangles, right? And so a lot of their activity is focused on the use of much power they can assemble to change the institutional behavior, right? And that's the kind of group that I started out organizing, right? Now, one of the things about that kind of effort by a local group is that they tend, this is a generalization, they tend to be held together not because they have an affinity between themselves. They are held together because they have an enemy outside, right? And when I was organizing in this mode with the Alinsky method, I was always trying to find an enemy that the people in the neighborhood commonly agreed to. Now, if you had that kind of a group held together by an enemy, you could also say to them, do you know that you have a lot of assets that you could be solving the problems that you were pressing somebody else to do? And if you can get an organization to see that it has power outside and it has power inside, we call that two-fisted organizing, right? We're not fighting with just one hand, we're fighting with two. For the ABCD is, what can we achieve with what we have? And the other thing is, what can we achieve by using our power to influence institutional behavior? And so generally, I think in the US, people look at the question, is an organization able to do both? Or can they do just the outside part? The trouble with organizations that are focused on outside institutions is that they mobilize people through their anger. And people have more to give that they want to give than anger. They have gifts, they have skills, they have passions, and they have knowledge, right? And so what I think is the ultimate goal is, can you create a neighborhood organization that has both powers? The power to confront and influence institutional behavior, and the power to create solutions with our own assets. And so we try to train organizers who can help create an organization that can do both of those things. Is that helpful at all?
I think it is. It's a I think it's a start of something.
Now, the glue that holds people together, because let's say they don't like what the city hall is doing, right? The government, right, is a common enemy, right? So in an ABCD neighborhood, what holds people together in a neighborhood? If we're not holding them together just with an enemy, We're holding them together around their own capacities. Right? And there, I would say that the two most common things that will bring people together in the US and in Canada and in cities in the main, will bring them together to begin to take responsibility themselves for problem solving and creating new ways, are first children. Children are probably the most common glue for neighborhoods, right? That holds people together. Yes, we want to do something for our kids. In the US, in the big cities, in the inner city neighborhoods. The other issue, and this may not be your thing, is safety and security and the problem of crime. So I know I can go to any neighborhood in a city in the United States and usually in Canada. And those are going to be the two ways that I can pull people together as producers of the future. They are the producers. It's not somebody outside.
Talking about this, John, I've recently had an example from a participant of DDI, Democratic Deliberative Democracy Institute, at Dayton, Kettering. It's a lady from Verena, from Germany, and she was telling me about a program whereby urban planners from a city and the mayor and the people in the city hall were having a roundtable where the main participants were the kids. So they got kids on a roundtable and they asked them about the neighborhood. How would you like for the neighborhood to look like? And they were astonished that the kids were seeing the city differently, of course, right, than the adults. It's the same with people differently enabled, right, and so on and so forth. So it's important. Just remember about it. I have a question from Claudia and Andrea. Thanks a lot for the questions. Claudia Șerbanuță, which is driving and she's in the call, but she wrote me on. Probably somebody in the car wrote this question. She's the former director of the Romanian National Library, and is very involved with working with libraries in Romania, but also in Republic of Moldavia. She has a PhD in US on the libraries. So she's saying we have a situations where institutions are not functional, but they look functional. So the adaptation of local actors in working with the institution is moving them further away from democratic community values. What do you do in these situations if you have examples of such things?
We have a project that's maybe 5 years long with a group of libraries across the United States in terms of how they might reorient themselves to be community-centered rather than book-centered, right? And once again, I'm going to refer the person who asked the question to our people who know something about it. If she'll send me an email, and could you show again my email address up there?
Yes, definitely. It's this one. We'll write it down. And
okay.
We'll show it. And anyway, we'll share it in the group chat. But just a second, we have it.
And you send me an email, and I will tell you who the convener of our faculty is, who's working with these libraries across the United States in all kinds of situations, including those that you're asking me about.
So, ladies and gentlemen, participants, this is John in the online way, in the online shade.
Yes, all right, good. Can I, let me mention something else that is the front edge of our work that I would like to share with you and maybe get some feedback after you've seen it. If you go, I have a website, and it is johnmcknight.org. I think it's org. If it isn't, it's com, but I think it's org.
Let's look at it now.
And there you will see, in terms of the choices across the top bar, you'll see one called Learnings. And I write one of those a month usually, and there are about 25 of them. But there are two that are about the front edge of our work now, and I wanted to point you to these and get your thoughts if you want to email me. And one of them is, the title is about precipitation, the precipitating functions of institutions. And the second one is about, the title is Refunctioning, the refunctioning of institutions. And both of them are some of our best experience and thinking now about what institutions could do. Can you still hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see you.
I'm trying to share. I'm trying to share the screen from your website, and I'm at johnmcknight.org, and we got learnings. Is this?
Yeah, that's right.
So we are here. What are we looking? So it's a compilation of John McKnight's learnings.
You'll see number 9 is, yes, refunctioning,
yes,
right?
So everybody can see the screen.
Yeah.
Yes. And we will
incidentally,
share the link afterwards.
Number 13 is the geometry lesson that helps people understand the difference between institutions and associations. Can you go a little further on? Can I see?
Yes.
The last, let's see, yeah. And then I'm looking for the one that has the word precipitation in it.
Precipitation. Yeah, number 7, institutional precipitation.
Yep, those two. And these are methods that an institution could use to stimulate citizen action without determining what the action will be. So I want to say that I do believe, and these 2 articles describe it, there are ways that institutions can actually precipitate citizen action without controlling what the action will be, so that the power to decide what to do is in the hands of the community, but the institution acted like a precipitant. That is, a precipitant, I think, brings 2 other chemicals together, but the precipitant isn't a part of the new product. So we're trying to get more and more government people especially, but also leaders of any kind of institution, to think, I am in charge of a structure, and beyond my structure is the democratic infrastructure of our society. How can I enhance the power and authority of that infrastructure without determining what they do? And so if you read those and you have ideas or you know of anything that's happening of that nature, please let me know.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. I have one question. Actually, it's not a question. It's a kind request to you. In one of the meetings at the Catering Foundation, you were you had a presentation that for me it was really interesting. You presented a list of topics that schools were kind of taking from communities from the beginning of the last century in order to share it and bring it back to the communities, but now institutionalized. And it was a list of like 90 or over 100 topics in there. So maybe you can share with us a little bit of that in a few minutes, because it's so important to see how much we can lose from not giving power to communities to function as communities, but we institutionalize everything, including the knowledge, but then the schools or the institutions that are supposed to give it back to communities cannot do it because they are overwhelmed by so many topics. It's like that was like incredibly important, and yeah, maybe you can share it with us a little bit.
Well, I think it's all, I've written most of what we know. If you go to our publications on our website, abcdinstitute.org, go to the publications, look under education. And I think one of the first one is one I've written, which is called The Educating Neighborhood. And everything that Mihai is talking about is written there. And I don't want to take up too much time. However, let me also mention a way of thinking about modern society. And it is, one of our great weaknesses is that we keep young people together with young people. And that anything that can be done that connects young people to adults is more productive than youth programs or schools. And so we have a fair number of neighborhoods that are now engaged in the process of identifying everything that the people in the neighborhood know. And if you read the education publications, you'll see all the list of what is it that people really know, right? In 2 blocks in the United States, almost always people know more things than the school teaches. 2 blocks. And so what we're trying to work with these groups on is how can they identify everything the people on the block know, and then have them connected to each other and to the kids in the neighborhood so that they become a learning resource. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the wave of the future. De-schooling neighborhoods. Because one of the things that's made neighborhoods weak, that are weak, is that they don't raise their children. And the collective process of child raising and the passing of the knowledge, skills, abilities that local residents have is central to redoing the idea of who young people are and what they do. And it says the young people are ours. I remember talking to a man from Nigeria, I think northern Nigeria, and he said, when a baby is born in our villages, after the baby is a month or two old, we all come together and decide what name that baby will have. Because that baby isn't a family's baby, it's the community's baby. And we all name it. And so what we're thinking is a way of thinking about youth is forget the institutional inputs. The question is, how can we put together local people's huge knowledge with local young people? And then how can we do inventories of the knowledge of young people that can be added to the pool? And our community becomes an educating neighborhood, and the school is a supplementary support system. But the future of young people is in all of our hands. And I think of all the ways that local people can come together effectively with low disputes, with maximum participation. This is one of those. People, everybody, if you ask those 4 questions, everybody's got things that they know and they're willing to share. This is true. I don't know whether you're in Lithuania or Moldova or Romania right now. On every block where you are, everybody knows something in answer to those 4 questions. And then if you say to them, would you be willing to share that with other people in the neighborhood or with young people in the neighborhood? Our experience is about 90% of the people will say yes. So let me give you a new view of a neighborhood. It is a bunch of people, that's my dog, a bunch of people waiting to become the mentors, teachers, and guides for the young people in the neighborhood. Now, who's going to connect them? They're the assets. Who's going to do the connection? And that's the new form of community organizing that we're working with local groups on trying to achieve. There are no youth problems. There are communities that have exiled their youth to programs, schools, and gangs. And so when communities recognize the assets they have and connect them to each other, this is knowledge, each other, and the young people, youth problems go away. So we refuse to talk about youth problems. There aren't any youth problems. There are community problems of exiled youth. Yeah, there's one of them, right. Mm-hmm.
So this is, we found, thanks Alexandra for give it. So this is from 1910, look, and then look in the 50s. So these were like themes that were like taken out from communities where initially they were like, nurtured and circulated, and then it were like, no, the school should do it. And it's like, when?
Yeah.
When can have it anti-smoking education, non-sexist education, global education, child abuse monitoring? And then this is the 90s. So I think, I mean, when I heard you there speaking, I was like, this is mind-blowing. We cannot understand the full impact of such. Look at it, and this is
New
US.
functions for schools.
This is US actually.
Real programs.
Exactly, and getting this out of the communities where they were somehow existing in such in some kind of form, putting it in schools, and of course losing them, because of course no one can support something like this in a curriculum. I mean, we are almost, I mean, let's say we have another few minutes. Whoever wants to ask another question, you are more than welcome, or two more questions. And then John, final remarks from you, and then I think we are ready to finalize the discussion. It was really lovely to have all of you on board, but still, if there are some pressing questions, you are more than welcome to ask John.
Mm-hmm.
Tudor, I see you there. No questions, Mr. Jurabla.
Well, I have one, but I did not want to take over.
Please.
So, thank you again. We're very thankful for sharing the knowledge and inspiring us. And thank you, Mihai, for organizing this. I'm more part of informal groups and organizations, and I'm a fan of bringing people together. And but the questions you shared with us are touch the core of what I am. So, what are your passions, and what do you know well enough to teach others?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is, if we bridge these two together, we can create communities on and on, based on what people know and are able to share with others. And I cannot stop but think that we always put ourselves in a box when we become specialists in something, and we stop discovering new opportunities. So this is why people discover limitations and become experts in the limitations they discover, and stop thinking creatively about solutions. And I believe it's very valuable to find the positive way of reinforcing things with optimism. So the question is regarding trust, which we lack a lot in the Eastern European countries. And by trust, I mean trust in ourselves and trust in others. There's, I think, an international trust barometer where we score on the last two places, I think, every time. So my question is, do you know any communities or examples from the United States where people are not so keen to talk to each other or trust each other or collaborate? Because that's how we are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The beautiful text about the American democracy is a text that I love, but we're not like that. I mean, the difference between the Eastern European cultures, especially the Romanian one, and the US culture is that we lack this ability to gather and form strong communities. And I believe there's a barrier in trust, and that will lack.
Yeah. Well, as you must have heard if you ever look in the newspapers these days, here in the United States, we have a hugely polarized country. And one part of the polarized group is people who don't trust the government. Those are the people who elected Trump. And then the others aren't people who are slaves to government, but they believe government has a role, right? So we're no exemplar. We have a huge distrust going on here in that sense. Then the young man who's just talking, let me see, your name is Tudor. if you know any place where people at the local level are beginning to ask, what do you know that you'd be willing to teach other young people? If you're involved in any of that, send me an email and tell me more about it. And maybe we can put you together with groups who are doing that here. So if you have a real place, send it to me. Let me mention, I think we need to close here, but let me mention something we just skipped by. The rural dilemma. The United States is emptying out, as is Canada, in rural areas. People just are still leaving, right? And so the best effort to try to have an alternative to everybody leaving has been developed by a group called the Nebraska Community Foundation. And if you look at their website, I think you'll discover a method that has been pretty significant in re-empowering rural communities. The Nebraska, Nebraska Community Foundation.
Thank you.
So I wouldn't want to leave rural without mentioning that possibility. Let me say, we conclude here, that there are several things, if you're interested in following up, that I wanted to mention. First, we have a website, and it's abcdinstitute.org. And within it, we have ABCD in Action, which is another website that is interactive. All our publications are on our website, and ABCD in Action is the interactive one. Excepting for the basic guidebook, which just costs too much, all our publications are free, and all of them are on the website, and they're classified. And I really would encourage you to look them over if you're interested further, because they're all much more specific than what I've been talking about. Another thing is that we do international trainings about every 6 months, and you can find where they are on our website. But the next one will be in New York City, April 23rd and 24th, and you'll find it there on the website. There will be another one in June, probably in Chicago, but it isn't posted yet, so you'd have to keep looking at it. The next thing is you can start a cluster. ABCD is a worldwide movement with no center. We are a circle, right? We're not a triangle, right? And 5 years ago, we had our first international conference, and there were people who came there from 22 countries who were already engaged, based on the publications, engaged in ABCD activity. And we only knew about 8 of them. So it's everywhere. And so, any of you are interested, you can start an ABCD group. Now, we don't knight you or make you official. We're not that kind of a group. But we'd be happy to try to support you if we can do something. So I know there's someplace in Brazil, there's an ABCD group. And we're not a centralist organization, we're a decentralist. But you can start an ABCD Romania if you want to. We don't patent it, right? And then the last thing is that I am open on this kind of thing to communicate with people if we can be of help. And you saw my email address, which is jlm abcd@aol.org. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, we'll
I'm
share.
a little slow in answering, but we're always interested in knowing what people are doing and contributing anything we know that might help you move this movement along, because it is all like a movement. It's more and more everywhere. So
like a river.
Yeah, right. I'm glad to know. Look, I didn't know before this morning what's in Romania, right? So maybe you can form a group.
Yeah, a lot of things are happening, and that's what we were talking in here, and we'll continue. It's a matter of finding a way to bring more of the methodology in a more structured way. As you know, for instance, through EduCab, we are working in Kenya also, and the Code Institute put us in contact with Lisa Fuchs, who is like tremendously useful there. And we had she's the person that is like holding trainings on ABCD methodology for the forestry for what is it called, ICRAF, and so on. So John, thank you so much for being with us. I know we are a few minutes, 2-3 minutes over what we talked.
A lot of it.
But I'm happy for those that could stay with us. So we'll anyway share it among ourselves, the persons that participated the recording of the conversation, because there were some things that maybe we want to come back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do this again.
And let's do this again. That's the idea, because there were some other people that wanted to join, but it was not a good time for them. And yeah, let's do it again, and have this safe space of conversation on sharing ideas from various communities, because this is incredible. Wherever we go, we see communities that have this kind of people that are like local heroes, that they are not in the newspapers, they are not in anywhere, but they are moving the mountains.
Yeah.
Then you have it now in the call. Some of them, they were like just listening, but be sure that they have amazing stories, even if they did not share it or they did not ask. And thanks again for having us. And yeah, let's. What's the time? It's 6:08 here.
Thank you for your life's work, sir.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege. I've really, this assures me once again that we got a movement here. Right.
Thank you so much, John. Thanks,
have a good day.
Take care.
And have a wonderful day ahead.
Be glad to join you if you have something else you want to do. Okay. Bye-bye.
Excellent.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.